All right. Hi, everyone. Good, good. All right, good evening, and thank you for joining us for this live streamed presentation, Owls of New Mexico, with presenter Zoë Moffett. I am Krista Tyson, Visitor Services Manager with Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or lovingly known as PEEC. PEEC is a nonprofit that runs the Los Alamos Nature Center here in town, which is currently closed. So that's why we're doing a lot of live stream presentations. So I want to first give a huge thanks to our members and donors for making this presentation possible. We are able to offer programming at this time because of you, our members and donors, and looking at our participants list, there are quite a few members, donors, and volunteers joining us tonight. So thank you for your loyalty and your support in whatever capacity that may be. I am going to make Zoë a co-host. So Zoë, if you want, are you able to turn on your video? All right, so everyone, this is Zoë, and I'm gonna introduce Zoë and then I'll give you the floor. So Zoë Moffett grew up in the forests of Connecticut before moving to Colorado, where she got her BA in biology and ecology from Colorado College. She considers herself to be an ecologist, as she has a love for everything flora and fauna. Her fieldwork has ranged from studying alpine flowers and bumblebees to collecting native seeds and restoration projects across the state of Nevada. However, her most memorable job was studying flamulated owls in Pikes Peak National Forest. As an avid hiker backpacker, she completed the Colorado Trail around 500 miles in the summer of 2019. And since May of this year, she has been banding birds in Bandelier National Monument, and she has been working with PEEC to bring the bird banding experience to kids' homes as they continue remote learning this fall. So Zoë, thank you so much for being here tonight. And you should be able to screen share. And I'll be here if you need me for any help. I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to turn my video.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you so much again for being here, joining us tonight for this virtual talk hosted by PEEC. Thank you, Krista, for that introduction. Like she said, my name is Zoë Moffett, and before I begin, I want to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from Los Alamos, New Mexico, which is the traditional ancestral territory of the San Ildefonso, Santa Clara, Cochiti, Zuni, Santo Domingo, and San Felipe Pueblo tribes. Next week is Indigenous Peoples Day, and it is important to continuously reflect on and honor the heritage of the original caretakers of this land. Many animals depend on the health of this land, including the subjects of tonight's talk, which are the owls of New Mexico. So tonight I'll be talking about the different species of owl that we have here in New Mexico, some of the adaptations that owls have to their nocturnal lifestyle, and I'll be touching on some of the conservation issues that some of our species have to deal with. So just to start, just to add a little bit to that nice introduction that Krista gave for me. Like she said, I'm from Connecticut and I moved to Colorado, where I went to Colorado College. And I moved here to New Mexico this May for this job where I get to band birds. But before then, my first job in biology was studying alpine bumblebees and how they pollinated flowers in the mountains of Colorado. That was working with the Mountain Area Land Trust. The next year, I got to work with Dr. Brian Linkhart's Flamulated Owl research team. And we'll be talking a lot more about flamulated owls later in the talk. The following season, I lived and worked across the state of Nevada with the Seeds of Success program, collecting native seeds off of the landscape for restoration projects. Last year, a really good friend of mine and I hiked from Denver to Durango along the Colorado Trail. So that's what I did instead of work for that summer. And then this year, I've been having so much fun banding birds. We're still continuously banding birds, even now during the fall. And I've been helping bring the banding experience into people's students' homes around the area via virtual lessons on Zoom. So to start, let's just talk about the different species of owl that we actually have here in New Mexico, because we actually have quite a lot, which is awesome. To start with the bigger owls, we have the long-eared, short-eared, barn, great horned, and Mexican spotted owls. For the smaller guys, we have the burrowing, western screech, flamulated, saw-whet, and northern pygmy owls. So these different species of owl, they live in a wide range of different habitats, and they have a wide range of different diets. I put the gray horned owl here because he's our amazing generalist. He will live across the country in a lot of different habitats and eat all these different foods that I have scattered here, different insects and rodents and lizards, and larger mammals like squirrels and things. But like any group of closely related animals, birds have evolved to fill a lot of different types of niches in and amongst their environment so that they don't have to overly compete for food and space and resources. So I've broken it up into three kind of major categories of habitat that we'll find our owls. And while I talk about this, know that like anything in biology, there's no solid rule. So while I say that these owls tend to hang out in these habitats, they also have wings and will move around a little bit. So they won't stay directly in these habitats. But associated with our open woodland shrubland habitat would be our western screech and long-eared owl. So when I say that kind of habitat, I really mean here in New Mexico, that's our juniper and pinyon pine and Gambel's oak, that shorter, shrubbier habitat where our overstory is a lot smaller and shorter, and it's just very open. And both these species of owl are primarily going to eat rodents in that area. Next is our open grassland and like agricultural farmland. Our three species with this habitat are burrowing owls, short-eared owls, and barn owls. Burrowing owls are actually very diurnal, meaning they are very active during the daytime. And they have a pretty wide variety of foods in their diet, from insects to rodents, to even some small birds and some lizards. The short-eared owl and barn owl both primarily will eat rodents. And the barn owl, like its name kind of suggests, really has a strong relationship with our man-made structures like barns that'll be found in them roosting or nesting in those kind of structures. And then lastly, our old growth conifer forests. That's where we're going to be finding northern saw-whet owls, flamulated owls, and northern pygmy owls. The northern saw-whet owl primarily will be eating rodents. The flamulated owl is actually almost entirely insectivorous and primarily eats moths. And the northern pygmy owl is our other very diurnal owl, very active during the daytime. And they actually eat a lot of primarily songbirds. And they will sometimes eat rodents. So not everybody realizes that a lot of our owls actually migrate, they move around. So I'm going to talk about two different types of migration, eruptive versus annual migration. In both cases, it's all about food. It's all about leaving a space that has not enough food to an area that has more food, maybe even less owls. So to start, eruptive migration is the more spontaneous, less predictable migration year to year. Most likely it'll occur in years where there's been kind of a population boom where there are more owls than the environment can kind of feed. So they'll kind of spread out, head south to more areas. The really common example of this would be the snowy owl. In 2013, that was a pretty big eruptive year for snowy owls. They're normally found up in the northern parts of our states and into Canada. And that year they were found all the way down in Florida. So that was a pretty big year for them spreading out. Our saw-whet owls are actually also have eruptive migration events, but they also will have annual migrations, which are more predictable migrations that we typically think of with our songbirds and hummingbirds, where every fall our birds leave their breeding ground and head south to areas where there's going to be more prey available. And we can break that down into our short distance migrants versus our longer distance migrants. So our shorter distance migrants, they're not flying quite so far. They're going to put on less fat on their body before they have to fly. And they might actually spend a little bit of time while they're flying down. Whereas our longer distance migrants, they're going to put on pretty significant fat stores before they make their journey. And they might make a little bit more of a direct flight, not lollygagging as much. So here's a map of a range map of our flamulated owl on the side here. And you can see that they are all the way up into the Northern Rockies and into Canada. And the saw-whet owls and burrowing owls have a similar kind of range all the way up north of us and into Canada. So these three species will all migrate south into Central America and Mexico. But here in New Mexico, our migrants aren't going to be flying very far. They're kind of more short distance migrants if they move, because our winters aren't as severe and they don't have to fly that far to get to more food. But their cousins up north are the ones that are going to be flying a lot farther to get to that food during the winter. So now I'm going to talk about some of the really incredible adaptations that owls have evolved for their lifestyle at night. Starting with their vision, their eyes. Owls in general, like you can see with this picture of the saw-whet owl, they have huge eyes compared to diurnal animals. This is pretty common with most nocturnal animals across the animal kingdom. Larger eyes really allow for more light to enter their eyes, as long as they're bigger because of the surface area. So they also, in their retina, in the back of their eye, they have a lot more rods, which are the light sensing receptors in our eyes, and a lot fewer cones, which are the color sensing receptors. So this helps them kind of have their better night vision. A common misconception or misbelief that we used to think about owls was that possibly if they were kind of awoken during the daytime or were active at daytime, they might be kind of blinded by that sun. But just like us, they have pupils, they can like dilate and contract, and so they can let in certain amounts of light. So the sun does not blind them in daylight. And another famous thing about owls is their crazy flexible neck. In this picture, this long-eared owl turning all the way around. Owls can move their head up to 270 degrees. We, I think, can move ours about 180 degrees in comparison, but they can't move their head all the way around like cartoons have led us to believe. That's not true. So they lack a lot of muscles around their eye. They can't move their eyeballs like we can. So instead, they have to just move their head with their eyes to look at things. So they're able to do this because they have extra vertebra within their spine and also very elastic veins in their neck, so that when they do twist their neck around, they're not cutting off blood circulation with that motion. So this is really advantageous because, as you can imagine, these owls are up in trees trying to be really sneaky and very still, looking around for prey. And instead of turning their whole body to go look at something, they can just turn their head just a little bit and then they're looking at their prey. So that motion and like the sound of them moving is very minimal, so they can better sneak up on their prey. So next is owl hearing. So again, these owls are active at nighttime. A lot of our owls are active at nighttime when it's very, very dark. So having a great sense of hearing can help out a lot. Several owl species have adapted or evolved asymmetric ears. Like this barn owl skull you can see here, the ear opening on the right side of the skull is higher than the left ear opening. So they are on different planes on the skull. Some owls have evolved a similar kind of mechanism where their ear flaps will actually angle to let in sound in different directions. So this asymmetry really helps to pinpoint sound. So if you can imagine that sound is kind of like in the horizontal plane versus the vertical plane, we can hear things pretty well on the horizontal plane because we have ears on either side of our head. So we can detect things with our eyes closed. Where is that sound coming from in terms of that direction or that direction? If I close my eyes and somebody talks to me on my left side, I can hear that voice hitting my left ear faster and louder than it hits my right ear. And so that difference helps my brain to decide that's the direction of that voice. Whereas in terms of this plane in front of us, there's not as much of a difference for our ears. So if my eyes are closed and there's a sound on this plane, it's a little bit harder for my brain to make the subtle differences in location. So if any of you have a dog at home and you've said something to your dog or they've heard something and they've looked like this, there's a theory that that's kind of this similar way of making that asymmetrical hearing so that they can better detect the location of that sound. And this is an incredible adaptation for owls to be able to pinpoint very subtle, quiet sounds in total darkness. Multiple studies have found that barn owls can actually detect and kill prey in complete and utter darkness. So they're basically just finding a tiny mouse or something simply from what they can hear. So that's an incredible adaptation. Related to their ears and hearing is the facial disc, which is the circular pattern of feathers on the owl's face. It almost acts like a satellite dish on their face that collects and focuses sound towards their face and towards their ears. And they even have these minute facial muscles that can move the feathers to help focus that sound even more. I noticed that with our two diurnal birds, with our pygmy owl and burrowing owl, these facial discs are a little bit less pronounced. So maybe that's because they're active during the day, they don't require such strong adaptations for hearing. Then again, we do have some examples of more diurnal owls that do have facial discs, so not sure. Next adaptation is these soft, silent feathers that owls have. If you've ever been outside and seen or heard an owl flying around you, it's very quiet and gentle noise compared to a bird, a diurnal bird of that size, like a raven or a crow or a hawk. If that kind of bird was flying over you, it would be much more noisy than an owl flying over. So there's a couple reasons for this. If you see on this diagram from this paper from Clark et al. That was published this year, you can see these close-up pictures of the leading edge of these flight feathers. You'll see this very fine, soft comb on the feather. I'll tell you that if you could see a picture of a diurnal bird feather, it's just like a hard edge. It doesn't have this comb. So the idea is that when they're flying, the air that passes over these feathers, that kind of comb breaks up that sound, and that kind of, it breaks up the air, which breaks up the sound of the air passing over the feathers. There's another idea that those combs break up the friction and also the noise of that friction of feathers that are rubbing against each other during flight. And then lastly, they have this very soft velvet texture of the feathers, and that helps to cushion the sound. So in the same paper, there are two main hypotheses as to why owls have evolved to have these like very specific types of feathers. So the first theory is on the top, the self-masking hypothesis. And so this theory has to do totally with what the owl is hearing. So the owl is in flight or is about to take flight, and it's listening for where that little mouse is in the forest floor. And as it flies, it wouldn't be great for the sound of its own flight to mask the sound of its prey, and that could like mess with it trying to find that prey. So having more silent flight would really help with that. The other theory is kind of opposite, which pays attention to what the prey can hear. So it's the stealth hypothesis, which is that they really just want to be sneaky and not have the prey hear them. So they're gonna have more silent flight so that the prey doesn't detect them. Also, owls are famous for their incredible camouflage. They have these incredible feathers that really mask them within trees, especially, like this eastern screech owl hiding in this tree. And a lot of these things really help owls with dealing with mobbing behavior. So some of you may have ever noticed any kind of bird of prey like a hawk or an owl getting kind of harassed and attacked by a group of other birds, like smaller birds. So this is what we call mobbing behavior, and it's really common to happen to our owls, especially the pygmy owl. Since the pygmy owl preys on smaller songbirds, they do not like the pygmy owl, so they will mob it. So this is an incredible behavior that's very entertaining to watch, and might be kind of an evolved response of these songbirds, so that they signal to that bird of prey saying, hey, I see you, don't try anything. Me and my friends, we're all here. We're gonna get you to leave this area. We're gonna keep bothering you. Don't you try to eat us because we can see you. Don't even try anything. That's an incredible behavior to definitely keep an eye out for. And being sneaky and quiet could definitely help these owls evade that mobbing behavior. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can go out and find them. So to start, it's a good idea if you go outside at nighttime, go for a night hike, take a flashlight, go camping. I oftentimes will wake up when camping in my tent and I'll hear an owl. Go for a walk while you're camping. Just really keep those ears open. The number one rule when looking for owls is to be very quiet. Step softly and keep those ears open, talk quietly, because owls have very soft, gentle calls, and a lot of them are very low frequency and can be kind of hard to hear for some people. Also, they can make really strange sounds. There could be a normal kind of call of a male giving a territorial call, defending its territory. But the sound that a female owl of the same species will make when it's begging for food, or even a hatchie or a juvenile bird of that year begging for food, those sounds are totally different and can kind of sound spooky and strange in the woods. I'll tell you, you should turn up your microphone or your speaker a little bit, because I'm gonna play you a couple different owl calls. And if any of you know your owls a little bit, it'll be a fun little quiz for you to see if you can recognize your owls. So here we go. Here's the first one. So it might not be a big surprise that the first owl I will show you is the Flamulated Owl, because that's the one that I worked with for a whole summer. And they have a very soft kind of boop call. It's very, very quiet. Here's our next one. So that one, my ornithology professor, Dr. Linkhart, he kind of described it like it's a ping pong ball hitting a table. It's like boop, 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 boop. That is the Western Screech Owl. And here's our last one. So some of you might have recognized that one. That is the Great Horned Owl. Actually, one more. This is one you might hear during the daytime. So it sounds kind of a lot like a lot of our songbirds actually around here, but that is our northern pygmy owl. So if you hear that during the day, run at it and try to find it. And you might actually find it easily because there might be a bunch of chickadees that are trying to attack it or something like that. So another really great way to look for owls is to look for owl pellets on the ground. So I usually find these kind of under larger trees at the base of the tree. And if you do find one, really look around. Owls have to roost during the day when they're not being super active, and you might find one roosting in a tree nearby. That bottom right picture is of a roost site of a long-eared owl, and it's got a bunch of pellets under it. Owls can roost in the same place and just spit up pellets in the same place. So that can be a really great way to find your owl. So these pellets actually exist because owls can't digest all parts of their prey, like fur and bones and the exoskeletons of insects. Like you can see in these pictures, the one on the right, top right, is some kind of rodent, you would think, with the bones and the fur. And then that bottom one looks like it has a bunch of insects in it. And I say dissect these, have fun with it, take a stick and poke at it and try to figure out what that owl was eating. Just a little biology lesson of why and how owls make their pellets. Unlike most birds, owls don't have a crop. So that's the food storage sac that most birds have. If you can picture like a like a chipmunk or something that eats a bunch of seeds and it fills up like right here. That's kind of like the crop for birds. Or you know how a lot of birds will, parents will regurgitate food to their young. That's because they're storing a lot of food in their crop and things like that. So owls don't have that. They will just ingest a whole meal like a mouse, and that's going to go through their esophagus into their proventriculus, which is like their first stomach. And that's where chemical digestion is the first stage of chemical digestion will happen, like where they'll have their stomach acids and things break it down a little bit before it passes into the gizzard, which is where mechanical digestion happens. Birds don't have teeth, so our version of mechanical digestion is in our mouth when we're chewing our food. The gizzard has really hard walls on the sides and kind of mashes the food, and that's where the mechanical digestion happens. And at the end of that process, all the good stuff goes on further into the bird, but all the stuff that they can't digest comes together in this pellet, and then they'll regurgitate it up through the proventriculus and esophagus and then out. So that's how pellets are made. So now I'll talk a little bit about what really threatens some of our species of owl here in New Mexico, starting with the spotted owls. The spotted owl is broken into 3 different subspecies. The northern and Californian species are up in California and up into the northwest. And then the Mexican spotted owl is in the Four Corner states and down into Mexico. So in the California and northern spotted owls, what really has been threatening them is habitat loss due to wildfires and logging, normal things like climate change. And then also invasive barred owls that kind of outcompete them in their own environment. And then here in New Mexico, the Mexican spotted owl, its initial kind of threatened thing was timber harvesting. And now their more current threats are wildfire again and just development. I've been working in Bandelier all summer, and we have Mexican spotted owls there, and we survey for them, and we keep an eye on them, and we figure out if they're successfully breeding and where they are doing that, and just keeping tabs on where they are because they are a threatened subspecies. They also seem to be pretty sensitive to human disturbances, like just human presence and noise tends to kind of dissuade them from using a breeding habitat. They like Ponderosa Pine and Gamble's Oak habitat near riparian, like stream areas. They also seem to really like rocky canyon areas and things like that. So they have very specific types of habitats where they like to breed, and they're pretty picky about it, which does not really help them very much right now. Next, we're going to talk about the burrowing owls. So like I said, these guys are pretty active during the daytime. They've lost a lot of habitat via development and agriculture on like farmlands and things like that. They're really heavily associated with things like golf courses or parking lots, and they're really kind of mixed in a lot with like housing developments and things like this, which makes them really heavily threatened by just our disturbing them. It doesn't take a lot for us to be doing something nearby that will just kind of dissuade them from breeding or hanging out there anymore. And also our pesticides that we use there is not great because they depend on fossorial or burrowing animals like prairie dogs and ground squirrels to burrow into the earth. And that's where burrowing owls actually will have their nests, is underground in those burrows. And historically, many ranchers and farmers have killed those burrowing animals off their land because it doesn't really help them. So grasslands are actually across the West have always been one of the most threatened habitats in our country because of farming practices, ranching practices, and all the invasive grass species we've had move into the West. The grasslands are just very threatened, and it's actually the home to some of our most threatened species of songbirds are grassland songbirds. And burrowing owl is kind of amongst all of that. So next, I'm going to talk about the Flamulated Owl for a little bit. So like I said, I got to work with Dr. Brian Linkhart. This year was his 40th year of his long-term demographic study of the Flamulated Owls. And almost everything I'm going to tell you about is stuff that we know from his 40 years of work. So flamulated owls are secondary cavity nesters, which means they rely on the cavities that woodpeckers have made and then they're done with, and then the flamulated owl can go and nest in them, and they can do that in live and dead trees. Their primary habitat is old growth mixed conifer forest. So a lot of Ponderosa pine is kind of what we look at. Ponderosa pine are very much adapted to frequent low intensity fires. They have some incredible adaptations for these fires. First of all, their bark is really tough and resistant to fires on the base of their trunk. But even more cool, as they grow up, they drop their lower branches. Those are shade intolerant branches, so they'll drop off. So as the tree goes taller, it kind of loses this ladder that could exist for the fire to get up into the crown, which can basically kill the tree if it loses its needles. So you can see this picture on the right is from actually our fall banding site. And I'll talk a little bit about this area where the Las Conchas fire burned. You can see all these aspen and then some surviving Ponderosa pine and Douglas fir. So that really tall Ponderosa pine is a perfect example of an older Ponderosa pine that survived this fire. And as they get older, they have this very spherical, bunchy top of the crown. And it turns out that that seems to be kind of one of the favored habitats for the prey of our flamulated owls, which are primarily moths. Moths seem to really like these big crowns of pines, like the Ponderosa pine. So that's one reason why flamulated owls are very much associated with these types of habitats. So I'm going to walk you through like a breeding season of the flamulated owl. To start, the male is the first, adult males are the ones that are first to arrive to the breeding site. In the spring, they tend to have a stronger site fidelity to that area. This is kind of because they know the area, they know where the juiciest moths are, they know where the best cavity trees are, and they know their territory boundaries that they want to like defend. So once they get there, they start up their marking and defending of their territory, and they do that with their territorial hoots that you guys heard. And soon after, our females will arrive, and the males will start to court those females. So females will give these food begging calls to the males. And then if the male wants to, the male will go fly around, catch a moth, perch next to the female, hand off that moth. And if all goes well, they'll pick out their cavity tree together. And then the female, after they've copulated, the female will have a clutch of 2 to 3 eggs. And then she will incubate those eggs, sitting on those eggs for about 3 weeks before they hatch. During those 3 weeks, the male will be the one feeding her. He will fly around, catch moths, and bring them to her. But remember, owls don't have crops to store their food, so he has to bring each moth to her one at a time. And I'm not sure, but I don't think there's a lot of calories in a moth. So it takes a lot of moths to feed a mama flam. And so that male is spending a lot of energy going back and forth, finding moths and feeding that female. And he will keep doing that. The eggs will hatch. Now she has some nestlings in there with her. And it takes a little bit of time for those nestlings to grow their downy feathers and regulate their own body heat. But once they do, she will also leave the nest and help feed them with the male. So they'll be in the nest for a little over 3 weeks then. And then comes the best part, is when they fledge the nest. And I can say, I think that was the best part of working with these owls, was watching the baby owls fledge that nest. We call it Fledge Watch. And you basically are sent to a tree at dusk, and you watch these fledglings consider leaving home for the first time. They kind of come to the edge of the cavity and just like look down and just rock and think about it. And they might do that for a night or 2 nights or 3 nights, but eventually they will jump out and kind of glide down towards the forest floor, and they'll land pretty close to the forest floor on a tree somewhere. And then they'll stay in the area and get fed by their parents for about another month. And the parents seem to tend to divvy them up, actually, like, all right, you take that one over there, I'll take that one. And then they kind of are in charge of their own fledgling, feeding their own fledgling. And then they all will migrate come fall time. The fledgling, the hatchier ones, are the last ones kind of to leave the area. So now I just want to talk a little bit about how wildfires affect our flamulated owls and their relationship with that. So recent fire regimes have been, I think everybody knows now, very intense stand replacing, as in they destroy entire stands of trees. And this is for a few reasons. Increasing temperatures and increasing global temperatures is one, increasing years of drought is another, and just a history of fire suppression in the West, where we've been suppressing fires. The forests have been getting really dense, so that when there is a fire, it's super hot, super intense, and super catastrophic. And so we've all been seeing what's happened this year throughout the West and in California and in the Pacific Northwest. So Dr. Linkart's work, part of his work happens actually within the Hayman Fire burn site in Colorado. It was the largest fire in Colorado's history until this year it was surpassed. And we have a similar site here in Los Alamos. We had the Las Conchas fire in 2011, and it was the second largest fire in New Mexico history. These pictures on the right are from the Las Conchas fire. Both in both of these fires, they're super devastating because they destroy these old growth forests that take hundreds of years to establish. And not only that, these fires can be so hot, and they can burn so hot that the heat gets down into the soil and kills everything that's even in the soil, which limits regrowth that can then happen. So in both of these fire burn sites, there are areas where no plant life has grown back yet, basically. 2002, I mean, that's 18 years ago in the Hayman fire, and I'm pretty sure there are still sites that have no vegetative growth coming back yet. It's very devastating for these types of forests that animals just like the Flamulated owl have evolved to live in. Owls are just one of the groups of animals that completely lose their habitat in these kind of intense fires, so they are not alone. So with that very sad note, I'm going to show you all these really cute pictures of owl babies. They're very great motivational tools to make you want to help them. As I ask you, or as you might ask, how can you guys help our owls and help our birds in general? Look into the eyes of these little babies and think about that. So to start, specific to owls, rodenticides are really horrible for all of our birds of prey, owls and hawks. When you poison any kind of rodent, like a rat or a mouse, any kind of pest like that, that rodent will die and be somewhere full of toxins, and then a bird will eat that up, and then they'll have the toxins and they can die from that. So use alternatives. One alternative are owls. So if we give them great habitat and we keep them healthy and happy, maybe they can help us by eating our rodents. So they are free, non-toxic versions of rodenticides. I'll also say, if you have a cat and you have to let your cat outside, you can't keep it inside, put a bell on your cat. Cats kill 2.4 billion birds every year in our country. That's a stat from the American Bird Conservancy. So please, they are just they're the #1 predator of songbirds. So please put a bell on them. Also, if you ever notice a bird flying into your window, trying to get into your house, you might want to consider putting sticker decals on your windows to help them see that barrier. I know you can buy like nice looking decals so that you don't have to look at something ugly on your window, but it can really help out the birds. Also, use apps like eBird or iNaturalist. Whether or not you really consider yourself a birder, it's a great way to help out with citizen science. Scientists use this data all across our country. Every time you put in a little data point in there, that just adds to this giant database of understanding where our birds are and what they're doing. Finally, next month, please vote. You can use your vote to really help out these birds in terms of the things that we as community members don't have a lot of power over, like climate change, or managing their forests, things like that seem like really big problems. Voting in officials who can help preserve our forests, our wildlife, and our planet as a whole, that's one way that you can kind of get active and kind of make your stance of you care about our environment and our owls and things like that. So I think that's it. I have a sources slide if anybody wants to know where I found out anything I talked about with you today. But I think now we can move on to any questions that you may have about owls. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Okay, we have a ton of questions. So we'll try and get through as many as possible. Anna would like to know, how can I encourage owls to come eat rodents and bugs in my yard?
Ooh, interesting. So I think in terms of like having nice, this is something that might be hard to control in your own backyard, but having nice habitat like trees and bushes and things like that will help with that. I know that having kind of habitat for those rodents and like insects can also help. Like I know that I think it's, you can't do this in Los Alamos, you have to rake up your leaves, but having actually standing leaf piles and things like that, or standing piles with twigs and things like that, actually provides habitat for our insects and mice and things like that. So kind of creating that habitat for the owls and for their prey can help.
Okay, do they only migrate at night?
As far as I know, they only migrate at night. I have not heard otherwise. Yeah.
Okay. What's the story behind the owl sitting on your field notebook? And I have to admit, I'm a little jealous of that one.
I forgot to mention that, yeah, that's an adult owl in that cavity, and that's a juvenile hatchier owl on that notebook. So while we work in the field with the flamulated owls, we band any adult we can and every juvenile bird we can. And so this picture was taken during the daytime because we can actually get into these cavities during the daytime sometimes and pull out the baby owl so that we can band it and take measurements and things like that. So that's why that bird's there, because we can take pictures with the birds and hang out with them while we process them.
That sounds fun. All right. What is the weirdest fact about owls that you can tell us?
Oh man.
Do you want to come back to that one?
Yeah, I might have to think about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'll have to think about that.
Where in Los Alamos, White Rock, or surrounding area is the best place or trail to see owls?
Ooh, so I am pretty new to the area. I've only been here since May, but I do know I do know that people have heard and found flamulated owls by the Ponderosa Pine, Ponderosa campground within Bandelier. There's a trailhead right there, and I know that there have been flamulated owls there, and that's just a really nice trail that goes through forest. It goes through a bunch of different types of habitat, so I'd expect that that would be a really good spot for owls, any kind of owl, but you might have to ask a more local person for more detailed suggestions, unfortunately.
Maybe we can come up with a list and
Yeah.
add it to one of our blogs. So stay tuned for that. All right, what is the purpose of the ear tufts on some species of owls?
Awesome question, because those aren't ears, and those aren't horns on the gray horned owl. They are just tufts of feathers. So for some owls, it seems like it helps with the camouflage into the like trunk of a tree. Those ear tufts kind of blend in with that. It also can be kind of an intimidation thing. Putting those up can kind of be a good intimidation for predators, or kind of like male to male competition and things like that.
Okay, which of these owls have you seen in Bandelier?
I have, oh, well, at our banding site, we have a resident northern pygmy owl that is always hanging out. We just hear it a lot, and we got to see it, I think, only once, but we've been hearing it for months now. It talks a lot. And then I've seen a great horned owl in Bandelier, and then I actually got to participate in some Mexican spotted owl surveys. So I have seen some Mexican spotted owls, which was very exciting for me.
Nice. Is the female owl bigger than the male owl, like other birds of prey?
I think they are, yes. So that's called, the scientific phrase for that is reverse sexual dimorphism, size dimorphism, because typically you would expect a male to be bigger than a female. And so in some of our species, like with the flamulated owl, the male and female are actually pretty much indistinguishable. We only are able to figure out their sex by their behavior, like the female is in the cavity with the young, and the male is out there talking a lot, versus or we have to take blood samples, and we'll do genetic work to figure out the sex of the bird. But I'm pretty sure, yes, with other larger species of owl, the female is larger than the male.
Okay. I have a question from a elementary school student. Are the flamulated owl eyes all black? And does the screech owl have eyes under its feathers? It looked like it didn't have eyes.
So yes, the flamulated owls do have very, very dark black eyes. It's very different from a lot of our other owls. And I'm gonna go to the screech owl, maybe this one. They do have eyes under their feathers. That one was closing its eyes, but owls do have a couple different layers that they of eyelids that they have. One is called the nictating eye membrane, and that's kind of this nice shield that they can have over their eyes while they're flying to protect their eyes. It's like another eyelid that's see-through and clear. So that's one more thing about their eyes.
Okay. What types of owls are in the baby owl? What types of owls are the baby owls in the picture?
Yeah, I definitely should have said. So that one on the left is another baby flamulated owl, and the ones on the right are actually northern saw-whet owls.
I'm glad I was on mute when you showed the slide.
Yeah.
All right. Is there an easy way to tell the difference between a male and female owl in any of the owl species?
So as far as I know, I might be wrong, but as far as I know, like they don't have these staunch differences in plumage like we do in a lot of our songbirds, where our songbirds can look totally different, the male and the female. As far as I know, our owls really look pretty similar, male to female, in terms of their plumage. And I think it would just be slight differences in size that might be a little hard to tell without two right next to each other. So, but behavior is a really helpful thing when trying to figure out the sex of an owl. At least during breeding season, it can really help you kind of figure out maybe what you're looking at.
Since owls regurgitate pellets, do they poop?
They do. They actually, I think you could see maybe in this picture, there is a bunch of like white scat on the ground as well with these pellets. So they do poop as well, especially baby owls. Just like our babies, human babies, baby birds poop a lot.
All right. Why is the saw-whet owl called that? How did it get its name?
I have absolutely no idea. Yeah, I don't know. They're really associated with forests and trees. I don't know. That's a really great question. Might be something you could look up.
So any of the kids that are watching tonight, if you guys have any guesses as to why the owl gets that name, you can type them in, I can share it. Or you can have that be your homework and you can send me an email and I'll share it with Zoe. Oh, why are baby owls fuzzy?
So, this is a good thing I have this picture up. So most across all types of birds, baby birds hatch from their the egg, and then they grow this downy plumage, this very fluffy downy plumage, and then they'll go into their like juvenile plumage, which is also tends to be really, really fluffy. So, I mean, I'm not quite sure exactly why being fluffy would be really helpful for these young birds. I know at first it can definitely help keep in that heat and things like that. But otherwise, I can't really think of why that would be advantageous. Another good question that I bet there might be an answer to out there somewhere.
All right, I do have some comments coming in on guesses how the saw-whet owl, it gets its name.
Yeah.
From their sound, the sound they make when they're sawing trees. Or maybe they sound like a saw. So there's lots of good ideas coming through.
Yeah, everybody go look up what how a saw-whet sounds and see if you think it sounds like that.
Yep. All right. So I hope I didn't miss any questions. So if I missed a question, can you retype it in the chat window for me? We had a lot of comments as well. Everyone enjoyed the program. Good job. That was great. I learned a lot. So, do owls make good pets?
In general, wild animals, as a biologist, I will try to dissuade people from keeping wild animals as pets. They belong outside. That being said, it's hard to work with these tiny guys and not want to just take one home, but it's not a great idea.
Oh, I lost it. They're coming in fast. I have to scroll back up just a second. Do any species of owls hunt fish that you know of?
I do know that there are some species that hunt fish. I don't know the names of them. I would assume they would be, well, they could be in like more inland, like with lakes and things like that, and be associated with maybe the ocean, but I actually don't know which owls that would be. I do know that there are owls that you fish though. Sorry.
Have you ever seen a tawny owl?
A tawny?
Tawny owl?
I have not. I don't quite know what that is. I'm not an owl expert. Really only focused on these kind of species.
Okay. And another question, what is the best place around Los Alamos to look for great horned owls? So we will try to put a list of hikes together and share it on our website or in one of our blogs, since that seems to be a common question that's coming through.
Yeah, and we can also, in the same place, also talk about like the best time of year to go looking for those owls and things like that.
Oop. They're coming in so fast that I have to scroll back up. Sorry. Did I ask you, do you know what the difference is between eastern and western screech owls?
So you didn't ask. They are different species. They are different breeding populations. I don't know any specifics as to how you would differentiate between the two. They do look pretty similar, but I think that there are differences in their plumage and coloration because they are in slightly different habitats, but they are different species, and they're just separated kind of in space. But you can see that they are pretty similar looking.
What do you think is the cutest owl?
I mean, having held flamulated owls, I have to say them. They are just so calm, and like in that picture, just looking right up at you, they just look at you and just kind of hang out in your hand, and they just seem really like happy with the situation when whatever's happening, and so they're just really, really nice friends.
Are any species of owls ever aggressive towards humans?
So typically no. It's like with almost all birds, like they might harass you if they think you are threatening something of theirs, like their nest or their young or something like that. But owls in general, I mean, all birds really don't really get into a lot of physical fights with anything, like even with each other. They're not really made to get into physical altercations. That's why they do a lot of singing and dancing and calling and things like that. So no, not really. Owls will tend not to attack humans. I have heard a story of an owl, though, kind of coming down and attacking a friend of mine when she was little, because she was trying to help I think it was the baby owl on the ground, and she was trying to go look at it and check it out and help it. And then the mom swooped in and tried to attack her. So.
Got it. Lori said, we had a great horned owl. Oh, I lost the message. Just a sec. Scrolling up. We had a great horned owl hooting in our street last night around 2 a.m., 46 near Mitchell Trail parking lot. Very loud, woke everyone up. I think he was telling us he wanted to watch your presentation. What eats owls?
Oh, sure. That's a really great thing I didn't talk about was the predators of different owls. So like with a lot of animals, the most kind of dangerous time for the owls are when they are young, when they're nestlings, when they're fledglings. That's when they're the most vulnerable. So like with flamulated owls, we get a lot of nest predation from squirrels, actually. Squirrels will climb up into tree cavities and either eat the eggs or sometimes the nestlings. So that can definitely happen across species, is things eating the eggs or eating the nestlings while they are like small and vulnerable. So definitely like rodents could do that. And then other birds of prey like Cooper's hawks or sharp-shinned hawks, both are types of hawks that will eat birds, or different types of falcons might eat younger owls and things like that. But again, it primarily will probably happen to those younger, like first year, hatch year baby owls.
Okay. And I'll read off a couple more questions if that's okay with you. I know we're going a little late, but we're having fun. Can you attract owls with owl boxes? And James, I'm gonna go back and scroll up and look at your question. So I just got your message too. So can you attract owls with owl boxes?
Yeah, that's definitely something I've seen kind of promoted and sold, is trying to create owl habitat. You definitely would want to kind of do the research of like what owls are in your area and what kind of owls that box would be suited for, because not all owls like live in types of cavities and things like that. Some owls nest kind of on more open nests that are just like kind of in the branches of trees and things like that. So I would definitely do the research on what kind of owls that box could serve. But yeah, I've definitely heard that they can work.
Okay. And James said, many thanks for reminding everyone to vote, never more important than now. While I have you, would you advocate the culling of invasive barred owls in the West to protect endangered spotted owls?
Could you repeat the last part about the barred owls?
Yeah, let me scroll back up to it. Just a second. I think I lost it because when the questions come in, it moves everything up. Sorry, just a second.
Yeah. I just want to make sure I totally understood the question.
Found it. While I have you, would you advocate the culling of invasive barred owls in the West to protect endangered spotted owls?
Gotcha. So what he's asking about is there has been like a systematic kind of removal of barred owls from the West, killing the barred owls that are there because they are kind of invading on the spotted owls. It's a pretty controversial concept, killing owls to help owls. I would need to do a little bit more research personally. I have a friend who studies the spotted owls out there, and part of me thinks that as we get further down this kind of rabbit hole of climate change and crazy wildfires and things like that, maybe we shouldn't be getting rid of the species that seems to thrive in this area. Spotted owls are super sensitive and seem to be kind of struggling. And I would advocate for a lot of things that help them, but I don't know if I agree with killing the owls that seem to be actually fairly well adapted for this environment. They seem, I think, to fill a similar niche in the ecosystem, unlike a lot of invasives that can kind of do a lot of harm. I think what I've seen is that the barred owls only seem to really harm the spotted owls. They don't seem to really harm a lot of other things in that ecosystem. But I definitely wouldn't hold firm to this idea. I would definitely want to do more research to answer that, like with a lot of conviction.
All right, I'm just scrolling through the questions to make sure I got everything. Why are owls nocturnal?
So, I mean, this is kind of a cosmic question in terms of just, like I said, we have all these different niches in our environment, and biology kind of just naturally wants to fill every possible niche in our environment. One of those niches is being awake and alert during nighttime. So it's kind of like somebody's got to do it. So just throughout the course of natural selection and evolution, somewhere along the line, these nocturnal birds adapted to being better at being active at nighttime and getting all their food at nighttime because nobody else was doing it. So, I mean, that's just a very basic way of explaining how some kind of animal is going to fill that niche of being active at nighttime.
Okay, lots of excellent presentation. Thank you for providing this information for us. Thanks, PEEC, for providing these opportunities. She's awesome. That was great. I mean, those are coming in so fast that I have to keep like scrolling up to find the questions. So everyone loved the presentation. James wanted me to remind everyone that Zoe's internship is over next week and she's looking for a job. So if you have anything, send it her way. So that's a nice little way to show how good you are at what you do. And I have a question. So I think that's it for now. I'm sorry for all the questions that I've missed. And if you do have some questions that you're eager to find the answer, you can email us at peek@peeknature.org, PEEC, and I can try and get some questions over to Zoe and maybe get back to you. You can visit the PEEC website for more information and to register for upcoming talks. Thanks again for tuning in. And thank you, Zoe. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.